was a night that would change the Forrester family forever. Forrester Creations, the symbol of fashion and legacy in Los Angeles, had been targeted in a bold and ruthless robbery. The thieves were well-organized, well-planned, and utterly unafraid of the risks involved in breaking into the highly secure headquarters of one of the city's most influential companies. Their objective was clear: steal crucial assets and documents that were not only valuable to the business, but also held the key to its future. The intruders had a specific agenda, but little did they know that their heist would not go as smoothly as they anticipated. Ridge Forrester, the head of Forrester Creations, was the first to realize something was wrong. It was late, but Ridge, ever vigilant in his role as both a businessman and protector of his family's empire, was at the office working late into the night. As he walked through the darkened halls of the building, he heard faint sounds coming from one of the lower floors: footsteps, muffled voices. Ridge immediately suspected that something was amiss. Without hesitation, he rushed to investigate, determined to protect the family's legacy at all costs. When Ridge arrived at the scene, he was met with a scene of chaos. The thieves, who had broken into the secure areas of the building, were rummaging through the vault, looking for valuable items that could destroy the Forrester family. Ridge's entrance startled the intruders, and in an instant, the situation escalated into violence. He quickly confronted one of the intruders, a skilled and ruthless criminal who attempted to fight back. A violent struggle ensued, with Ridge using all his strength and training to subdue the intruder. Ridge managed to overpower one of the attackers, landing a powerful blow that sent him crashing to the ground. But before he could react further, a second, armed thief appeared from the shadows, striking Ridge from behind. Ridge's body crumpled as the sharp pain of the wound in his side tore through him. The blow was deliberate and deadly, a strike that was aimed at his heart. The thief's knife had found its mark, and Ridge was left gasping for breath, unable to keep his balance as he collapsed to the floor. His world began to blur, his vision narrowing as the blood poured from his wound. Ridge, though powerful and capable, was no match for the sheer number of attackers who had now surrounded him. The pain was excruciating, but his thoughts were focused elsewhere, on the family he loved, the empire he had built, and the woman he cherished above all others. Ridge barely had enough strength to reach for his phone, his hand trembling as he dialed the number he knew by heart. Brooke, his wife, the love of his life, was the only one he needed by his side in his final moments. His voice was weak as he managed to speak her name, pleading for her to come quickly. "Brooke, please, hurry," he gasped, barely able to form the words. I'm hurt." Brooke, who had been at home, immediately felt the weight of Ridge's words. Her heart skipped a beat as she heard the panic in his voice. She didn't ask questions, she simply dropped everything and raced to Forrester Creations. Her mind was filled with fear as she drove through the streets, her heart pounding in her chest. What had happened? Why was Ridge calling her in such a state? Nothing could have prepared her for what she was about to find. When Brooke arrived at Forrester Creations, the building was eerily quiet, the lights dimmed, and the sounds of chaos had faded into silence. She rushed inside, her fear mounting with every step she took. As she approached Ridge's office, her worst nightmare became a reality. There, lying on the cold marble floor, was Ridge. His body was motionless, his eyes closed, and blood was pooling around him. The sight of him, so still, so vulnerable, sent a shockwave through Brooke's entire body. She dropped to her knees beside him, her hands trembling as she reached for him. "Ridge! Oh my God, Ridge!" Brooke screamed, her voice filled with desperation. She shook him, hoping for some sign that he was still alive, but his limp body gave no response. His chest rose and fell faintly, a shallow breath escaping his lips, but it was clear that Ridge was fighting for his life. His strength was fading fast. Without a moment's hesitation, Brooke called 911, screaming into the phone for an ambulance. Her voice cracked with fear as she relayed the situation to the dispatcher, who assured her that help was on the way. But in that moment, Brooke was unsure if it would be enough. She could feel the coldness of the air around them, the weight of the moment pressing down on her. It felt like time was standing still, and every passing second was a reminder of how fragile life could be. Her mind raced, recalling every moment she had spent with Rich, the man she loved, the man who had always been there for her. Now he was lying in front of her, injured and helpless. As the paramedics arrived and worked to stabilize Rich, the full scope of the robbery began to unfold. Forrester Creations had been targeted by the thieves, and valuable assets had been stolen, including important documents that could destroy the family's reputation and business. The loss was immeasurable, and the Forrester family was shaken to its core. The robbery wasn't just about material possessions. It was about the trust and security that had been shattered, the sense of safety that had been stolen from them. Whoever had orchestrated this heist had done more than just steal items. They had attacked the very foundation of the Forrester empire. As Ridge was rushed to the hospital, his condition critical, the investigation into the robbery began. The authorities quickly pieced together the details of the break-in, but they were left with one major question: who was behind the attack? As the Forrester family rallied together in the face of Ridge's near-death experience, they realized that this was no random act of violence. The thieves knew exactly what they were after. But the biggest shock came when it was revealed that the mastermind behind the robbery was someone much closer to the Forrester family than anyone had expected. The investigation quickly uncovered that one of the people closest to the Forresters had been involved in the heist. The person responsible for orchestrating the robbery had managed to manipulate everyone around them, hiding in plain sight. The Forrester family was stunned as the truth began to come to light. Betrayals within the family were exposed, and the very people they had trusted were revealed to be working against them. As Rich fought for his life in the hospital, the Forrester family was forced to come to terms with the painful reality that not only had they been victims of a brutal crime, but they had also been betrayed by someone within their inner circle. The trauma of the robbery was compounded by the sense of betrayal, as each member of the family wondered who they could trust. They were left to pick up the pieces of their shattered lives and their business, knowing that the road to recovery would be long and difficult. But one thing was certain: they would not go down without a fight. The Forrester family had always been resilient, and in the face of this unimaginable crisis, they would band together to reclaim what had been stolen from them. As the investigation progressed, the truth would eventually be uncovered, and the Forrester family would stop at nothing to bring the perpetrators to justice. Ridge's life hung in the balance, but as the Forrester family came together, they found strength in each other. The robbery had tested them in ways they never imagined, but it also revealed the unbreakable bond that held them together. In the end, they would stand united, ready to take back everything they had lost, and to face whatever new challenges awaited them on the horizon. The Forrester legacy would not be so easily destroyed, and the fight for justice and redemption was only just beginning. The following days were a blur of pain, grief, and disbelief for the Forrester family. As Ridge lay in the sterile confines of the hospital operating room, the rest of his family waited anxiously in the sterile hospital lobby, their hearts heavy with dread. The hours dragged on, with each passing minute intensifying the overwhelming sense of hopelessness that gripped them all. The paramedics had done everything they could to stabilize Ridge, but the damage was far too severe. The knife had pierced deeply, causing irreparable damage to his vital organs. No matter how hard the doctors tried, the bleeding couldn't be controlled. Ridge's life slipped away, and with it, a part of the Forrester legacy was forever lost. Brooke was a shell of the woman she once was. Her eyes were red and swollen from the endless stream of tears that seemed to flow without end. She had been by Ridge's side every moment, praying for a miracle, willing him to survive, to pull through. But that miracle never came. Ridge was gone. Her heart had shattered into 1,000 pieces, and she felt as though her entire world had crumbled beneath her. The man she had spent so many years with, the father of her children, her partner in both business and life, he was no more. The grief was suffocating, and she couldn't even begin to fathom how to move forward without him by her side. As the news of Ridge's death spread, the Forrester family was plunged into chaos. The company, which had once been their collective pride and joy, now seemed insignificant in the wake of such a devastating loss. Ridge had been the cornerstone of Forrester Creations. His creativity, his leadership, and his ability to command respect within the fashion industry were irreplaceable. With his death, the future of the company seemed uncertain, and the once unified Forrester family now stood on the precipice of ruin. Steffi, who had been recovering from the traumatic accident that had left her in a coma, awoke to the heartbreaking news that her father, Ridge, was gone. She couldn't comprehend the magnitude of the loss at first. Her body still weak from the accident, she struggled to process the reality of her situation. The pain in her heart rivaled the physical pain she had endured during her recovery. Steffi had always been close to her father, looking up to him as a guiding figure in her life. Now, without him, she felt utterly lost. Her mind raced as she tried to make sense of it all. Not only was she grappling with her own personal trauma, but now the Forrester legacy seemed threatened by Ridge's death and the betrayal that had shaken their family to its core. Eric, too, was devastated. He had lost his son, his partner, and his closest confidant. The Forrester empire, which he had built from the ground up, now felt fragile and vulnerable without Ridge to carry on his work. Eric knew that Ridge had been the heart of Forrester Creations, and his death left a gaping hole in both the company and the family. Yet, as the patriarch of the Forrester family, Eric knew he had to remain strong, at least for the sake of his children. Despite his immense grief, Eric set his emotions aside and focused on the future of the company, vowing to keep Forrester Creations alive, no matter the cost. But in the back of his mind, he couldn't help but wonder if the company would survive the profound loss of Ridge, or if the family itself would disintegrate under the weight of this tragedy. The rest of the Forrester family gathered, their faces etched with grief, confusion, and fear for the future. They had just lost a beloved son, husband, and father, but they had also lost a pivotal figure in their business, the man who had been at the center of it all. Their family, once an unbreakable force, was now in turmoil. Forrester Creations was facing a crisis far beyond the robbery that had preceded this unimaginable blow. The company was fractured, and the unity they had once enjoyed seemed like a distant memory. As the funeral arrangements were made, the family struggled to find any semblance of normalcy. The loss of Ridge was a weight that none of them could bear. Brooke, especially, was left with the unbearable silence of their home, a home once filled with laughter, love, and the promise of a bright future. Now it was an empty shell, a constant reminder of the man she had lost. The grief was too much to bear, and at times it felt as though it would swallow her whole. She leaned on her children, the only source of comfort she could find in the midst of the darkness, but even they couldn't fill the void left by Ridge's absence. Meanwhile, the investigation into the robbery continued, but it took a back seat to the overwhelming grief and chaos that had engulfed the Forrester family. The family was still reeling from the shocking revelation that one of their own had been responsible for the robbery, but now, with Ridge's death, the sense of urgency had dissipated. The Forrester family was no longer concerned with recovering stolen documents or tracking down the thieves. They were consumed with mourning the man who had been the glue that held everything together. As weeks passed, the question of who had orchestrated the robbery remained unanswered. The authorities had made little progress, and the Forrester family began to lose hope that the perpetrators would ever be brought to justice. But the truth was that the true mastermind behind the robbery and Ridge's death was closer than anyone realized. It was a family member, someone who had been involved in the business and had direct access to everything the family held dear. This betrayal was not just about money or power. It was about personal revenge, jealousy, and a thirst for control that had spiraled out of control. The Forrester family was torn apart, with suspicions running high and no clear path forward. Ridge's death had cast a long shadow over their lives, and every decision felt like a battle. Steffi, still recovering from her accident, felt powerless in the wake of this tragedy. Eric was desperate to find a way to salvage what was left of the family and the business, but the grief and loss were too overwhelming. Brooke, whose heart had been shattered beyond repair, was left to pick up the pieces of a life she no longer recognized. The Forrester family was broken. But as the pain of Ridge's death continued to consume them, they would eventually have to confront the truth. The betrayal that had led to this tragedy would not remain hidden forever. Whoever had masterminded the robbery and caused the destruction of their family would eventually face the consequences. But for now, the Forrester family was left to mourn. Ridge's legacy would live on, but the journey ahead would be one fraught with betrayal, revenge, and the difficult task of finding redemption in a world that had been turned upside down by a single, brutal act of violence. Ridge was gone, and nothing would ever be the same again.